So I'm going to talk about, for a few minutes, how to draw an ellipse inside of a plane. And more specifically, it's really about how to know if an ellipse that you've drawn is actually a circle in 3D space. And I know I've mentioned plenty of times in the past that an ellipse is simply the two-dimensional representation of a circle in 3 dimensions. But obviously you can actually have an elliptical shape that isn't a circle. And so we need to know how to be able to differentiate them, and more importantly, how to construct ellipses that are specifically circles. And why would we want to do that? Anytime that we're constructing objects that have actual cylinders, like wheels, anything that has to be properly circular. And this gets pretty important. So we have two different situations. And I'll tell you right now, this one here is not a circle, and this one is. But the question is why? And the way to figure it out is when you have an ellipse. Actually, I'll use an actual ellipse drawing tool here, because drawing ellipses digitally is not the easiest thing in the world. I don't want to make an ass of myself. So here you go, an ellipse. First thing you want to do is you want to figure out the minor axis. And you'll notice that in both of these situations, the minor axis is aligned to the vanishing point. And the minor axis comes straight out of the surface of the ellipse, or the circle, in whichever case. And so that's all correct. The only thing that's different between these two is the degree of the ellipse. And so basically at this orientation, this ellipse needs to have a certain degree in order to actually be a circle. So here, let's say this is one of our vanishing points. And this one is another vanishing point. And note that this point here, it's arbitrary. So technically, if the only thing that you had in your whole world was just this ellipse, you could say this ellipse is a circle, and nothing else would exist in the world to contradict that. The problem is when you have other objects and they start to play together, those rules either get contradicted by other objects or they get reinforced. And so basically things have to be consistent. Now, from this vanishing point, let's draw lines out that actually just barely touch the edges, the ends of our ellipse. And I'll tell you right now, because we're setting out the vanishing points after the ellipse and nothing else exists, the ellipse is going to be a circle, because we're basing everything else around that notion. So what we're doing here is we're constructing a plane around our ellipse. And what we see here is that the 2 points that actually touch the top and bottom of the ellipse, they're immediately above and below each other. They're not set at an angle, and they don't touch at different verticals, like this one. They're actually perfectly aligned, just like this one. And what that tells us is that that ellipse's degree is perfectly correct for this ellipse to be a circle with this configuration of vanishing points. Now let's try and draw one that's not so perfect. So I'll just go ahead and copy some of these points here so that we have a similar setup. But what I want to do here is I want to move my vanishing point so that it's much closer to the other one. So here the distance was much further, here it's closer. So in order to line up my ellipse correctly, this is very tricky. Alright, I'm actually going to pause this recording while I figure out how to align this damn thing correctly, so give me a second. Okay, that's good enough. And so if we draw a plane around this, you're going to see that the actual points that it intersects with the top and bottom of the plane are very far apart, meaning that with this configuration of vanishing points, it just is not a circle. It's something very different. And so in order to get the in order to match two properties, and that would be getting the ellipse to touch this side of the plane and to get the minor axis to actually fit properly, so that would be something like this. I mean, to not to fit properly, but to align to this vanishing point, which we've now moved, the degree of the ellipse had to change. The degree and the angle, really. But the angle is really a factor of the minor axis. So now it's slanted and these 2 points are not aligned correctly, not like this one. And so that tells us one very simple concept. If the points where your ellipse actually touches the top and bottom of your plane are aligned vertically, then it's a circle. Meaning that this ellipse here could be used for a wheel or for the end of a cylinder or whatever you want. Whereas this one, I mean it could, but it would be a very squashed cylinder. And now, so this is generally it's important when you're actually trying to construct a cylinder, cylinder inside of a box, because boxes are actually, the size of the box is important. This also means that you could technically use an ellipse to create a cube. So say you have a plane here. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's not the correct approach. So basically, if you want to draw a perfect cube, you need to start off by drawing a perfect square. And if you want to draw a perfect square, then the best way to do that is to draw an ellipse. So again, we're going to line our minor axis up. And yeah. Actually, I'm going to reduce my degree. And now, knowing that this is a since we're building this ellipse completely off of this one vanishing point, we can simply say that it represents a circle, and there's nothing else here to contradict us. So let's just draw an ellipse that is aligned, its minor axis is aligned to this vanishing point here. And then let's find another vanishing point here to actually draw a plane around it. So it's pretty much aligned, the contact points, and so we can say that's a circle. And now, because of that, we can also say that, because of the properties of a circle, the width and height being equal, you can say the same thing of this plane. So it's a square in 3D space. Now that leaves us with having to actually make sure that the depth is also equal. So we can't just put a line anywhere. And this is where it can get a little bit trickier, because we have to draw an ellipse whose minor axis aligns to this vanishing point, and whose degree makes it so those two contact points actually touch and are aligned roughly. Again, I'm going to pause this because this takes a little bit of time to actually figure out. And there we go. Those contact points are aligned, so now we know that if we draw the other line of our box right here, you've got your depth. And now you can just plot your lines back to your vanishing points, and there you go. A perfect cube based on these two vanishing points. So it's definitely rather tricky to actually draw an ellipse that is properly aligned and has the correct degree inside of a plane. So that's something that you're simply going to have to practice. Not only is it a matter of getting your minor axis to be accurate, but now you also have to be able to, and honestly I haven't practiced this enough, so I probably can't do it too well just yet. Whatever, something like that. The main thing is that if you're not working with vanishing points and we don't plot our perspective in our drawings, it does become a little bit easier because there's more leeway. But if you were actually plotting out all of your perspective perfectly, you might be a little bit better off actually working with ellipse guides to actually help draw your ellipses accurately. So that's pretty much all I had to say on this topic, and so I'll leave you with that. I hope that helped.